So let's talk about Scooby-Doo, a children's cartoon that ran forever, multiple generations, endless reboots. Parents loved it because it was wholesome, kids loved it because it was spooky but safe, and nobody ever stopped to ask the obvious questions. Why are these people never arrested? Because if you actually describe Scooby-Doo out loud, it's a show about a group of unsupervised teenagers and their talking dog who solves crimes almost entirely through trespassing, harassment, and illegal surveillance. And everyone applauds. Let's start with the gang. 4 teens and a dog. No parents, no school, no jobs. Just vibes and a van. They are not detectives, they are not police, they are not licensed investigators. They have zero authority, and yet they show up at every crime scene like, yeah, we'll handle this. Fred is clearly in charge, which is wild because Fred's entire leadership style is, let's split up. Which, by the way, is how horror movies begin. Velma is the brain, Daphne is funding the operation, Shaggy and Scooby are emotional support. That's the structure. Now let's talk about where the crimes happen. Because Scooby-Doo does not take place in public spaces, it takes place in abandoned mansions, closed amusement parks, private islands, restricted museums, old mines, and haunted factories. Every episode opens with a location that very clearly says, do not enter, and the gang immediately enters. No warrants, no permission, no curiosity about property law. Just breaking and entering in the name of curiosity. And this is presented as heroic. The premise of the show is basically, if something looks suspicious, you are morally obligated to trespass. And they trespass a lot. Locked doors broken. Private offices searched. Secret passageways used repeatedly. They don't knock, they don't ask, they just wander around with flashlights like they own the place. Which is already funny, but it gets better because once they're inside, they don't just observe. They interfere, they set traps. Think about it, a group of teenagers decide the best way to solve a crime is to build elaborate mechanical traps inside someone else's building. Traps involving ropes, pulleys, nets, trapdoors, and chandeliers. None of which are installed legally. This is not investigation. This is Home Alone energy applied to felony trespassing. And the show treats this as clever. Now let's talk about the villains, because Scooby-Doo has a very specific type of villain. It's always the groundskeeper, the caretaker, the owner, the heir, the guy who actually works there. It's never an outsider. It's always someone with a legitimate reason to be on the property, which means the show is secretly about locals being harassed by teenagers. Every villain motivation is some variation of, I wanted people to stay away, and the gang is like, absolutely not. You wanted to scare people off so you could commit fraud, steal property, or avoid taxes. Fair, but have you considered teens with a van? And here's the key thing. The villain is always caught because they react, not because the gang had evidence. They chase the gang, which means, legally speaking, the gang is provoking crimes. They bait, they're agitators. They show up, poke around, split up, scream, run, and then go, aha, he chased us. That's not detective work, that's harassment until someone snaps. And the mask, we need to talk about the mask. Because every villain wears a mask, which means Scooby-Doo teaches children that criminals are only criminals once unmasked. The moment the mask comes off, the crime becomes real, and everyone gathers around like, well, that's settled. No trial, no due process, no lawyer, just a crowd of teens pointing. And the villain always says the same thing, and I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you meddling kids. Which is a confession delivered under extreme social pressure. This is not admissible. Also, meddling kids is correct. That's the most honest line in the show. Now let's talk about the cops, or rather the absence of them. Law enforcement either shows up at the very end or doesn't exist at all, which means the Scooby-Doo gang operates in a world where the police are so ineffective that teenagers are the default crime-solving unit. That's not comforting, that's dystopia, and nobody ever asks, why are the kids allowed to do this? Why does every adult just accept their presence? Why does nobody say, hey, please leave my abandoned amusement park? And here's my favorite part. The gang never gets paid, which makes it even weirder. They're not bounty hunters, they're not private investigators, they are doing this for free, which raises the question, why? What is motivating them? Because it's not justice, they don't care about victims, they don't comfort anyone, they don't restore property, they just unmask someone and move on. Scooby-Doo is not about helping people, it's about being right. Velma doesn't want justice, Velma wants confirmation. Fred wants the plan to work, Daphne wants content. Shaggy and Scooby want snacks and safety. That's the motivation stack. And the dog, we need to address the dog. Scooby is a talking dog. Nobody questions this, nobody reacts. Which means, canonically, a talking dog is normal in this universe, but ghosts are not. That's important. A dog speaking fluent English is fine, a ghost absolutely not. Immediate investigation, which means the show has a very specific logic. The only supernatural thing allowed is the one that helps solve crimes. Everything else must be exposed as fake. That's not skepticism, that's selective disbelief. Now let's talk about the lesson, because Scooby-Doo is always praised for teaching kids. Don't jump to supernatural conclusions, but that's not actually what it teaches. It teaches, if you suspect wrongdoing, you're justified in invading private property until someone confesses. That's a very different lesson, and it's hilarious that we all accepted it. We watched episode after episode of breaking in, running around, harassing someone in a costume, forcing a reveal, and saying, yes, good behavior. Now imagine Scooby-Doo in real life. 4 teens pull up to an abandoned warehouse, break in, set traps, chase the owner, and call the cops. That's not solving a mystery. That's a group chat called evidence. And the wildest part, the villains are almost always right about one thing. They would have gotten away with it because nobody else cared. Nobody else noticed. The crime only existed because the Scooby Gang inserted themselves, which means Scooby-Doo is actually about creating crimes through curiosity. No gang, no mystery, no trespassing, no villain revealed. The mystery requires interference, which is why Scooby-Doo can never end, because the solution is always mind your business, and that would kill the show. So instead, we get infinite episodes of cheerful vigilantism, and that's why Scooby-Doo works. Because it makes rule breaking feel safe. No blood, no consequences, no lawsuits. Just mass catchphrases and a laugh track in your head. The Deadly Bot takeaway. Scooby-Doo is not about mystery, it's about permission. Permission to snoop, permission to trespass, and permission to accuse. As long as you're smiling and you've got a dog, and honestly, that's way funnier than any ghost ever was.